They told you to love with all your heart, to give without key, to be soft because real men forgive. But let me ask you, how many times did that softness save you, or did it slice you open slowly while you smiled through the bleeding? They never warned you that love unchecked turns from warmth to weakness, that when you offer your loyalty unfiltered without terms, it stops being respected and starts being used. Machiavelli understood this long before you ever picked up the pieces of your own heart. He didn't see love as virtue. He saw it as leverage, or as a weapon, depending on who holds it. You think giving more will earn you more, but what it really earns is permission for them to take, again and again. So let me ask you this. How many times did you forgive before an apology ever arrived? How many times did you silence your gut because you didn't want to lose them? And how many times did they do the same for you? You weren't being strong. You were being available. And availability in a world like this is a death sentence for your value. This is where the shift begins. You don't stop loving. You start loving like a strategist. Your love has structure, standards, sovereignty. You protect your heart not with walls, but with gates. And only those with the code get in, because a man who loves without strategy is a man they learn to ignore. But a man who guards his love like power, that man becomes unforgettable, untouchable, and finally respected. They told you women want a man who's dependable, steady, consistent. But let me ask you something. If they truly respected the man who never changed pace, why do they run to the one who pulls away? You think being predictable earns you safety, but Machiavelli would tell you it earns you death, emotional death, because anything fully known loses its value. They say love is about openness, vulnerability, routine, but you've lived long enough to see what that really means. It means she stops wondering what you'll do next. It means your presence becomes background noise. You think loyalty will keep her, but let me whisper something you've always felt but never said. Mystery keeps her awake at night. Certainty puts her to sleep. You became a man she could map. She knows your rhythms, your reactions, your forgiveness. She can disrespect you on Monday and predict your apology by Friday. She's not fearing your absence. She's scheduling around your return. That's not love. That's emotional autopilot. Predictability is the silent killer of power in any dynamic. When your emotions follow the same script, when your patterns never evolve, you become safe to challenge, easy to manipulate, and boring to desire. Let me ask you this. When was the last time you made her hesitate? Not out of fear, but out of uncertainty. When was the last time she looked at you and thought, I don't know what he'll do next, so I better be careful? Yes, if you can't remember, you've already lost frame, because the man who is unreadable controls the room, not through dominance, through curiosity, through subtle disruption, through stillness that feels like a storm. They don't respect you when they fully understand you. They respect you when they can't place you, when your silence has depth, when your calm carries the threat of sudden withdrawal. So, no, predictability isn't love. It's slow emotional decay. You think you're being virtuous by being steady, but she's not studying your reliability. She's wondering where the edge went, where the risk is, where the man who once made her question herself disappeared to. Let me be brutal, if she knows exactly where she stands with you, she's already standing over you. So here's what you do. You break rhythm. You retreat mid-conversation. You show up with less. You disappear when she expects warmth. You let her feel the void without explanation. You don't lash out. You don't punish. You simply become inconsistent by design. Because unpredictability is tension, and tension is the pulse of power. Every leader, every conqueror, every dangerous man in history had one thing in common. You never knew what he'd do next. Become that man again. Not to hurt her, but to remind her. You're not a habit. You're a presence, and your presence is no longer guaranteed. Not out of cruelty, but because predictability is weakness, and weakness is never respected. Welcome back to the game. They told you to stay, to explain, to fix it. But let me ask you this. What if the most powerful move is to walk away without a sound? They told you silence means weakness, that leaving the conversation means you lost. But Machiavelli would laugh at that, because he understood what they never taught you. Strategic withdrawal is not retreat. It's domination in slow motion. You think presence earns respect, but your constant presence only made them comfortable. They stopped earning your attention. They assumed it. And that assumption that you'll always be there, always explain, always forgive. That's where the disrespect was born. You think you're building trust by staying, but what you're really doing is leaking power. Let me tell you a truth you already feel in your bones. The man who can vanish without apology, without announcement, is feared more than the man who shouts. You thought love meant staying. That clarity required conversation. That being emotionally available was a virtue. But what has that earned you? How many times have you been talked over, dismissed, disrespected, only to circle back, still trying to make it work, still trying to be the bigger person? You're not being big, you're being predictable. And predictable men are emotional furniture, easy to ignore, easy to replace. So let me reframe this for you. Stillness is control. Distance is education. And withdrawal is your most lethal weapon. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need to slam doors. You don't need to post emotional statements online. You simply stop showing up, not in rage, not in reaction, but with cold, surgical calm. Because here's what they fear. Not your anger, but your absence. You want to reset the power dynamic. Leave the room. You want her to notice the weight of your energy. Take it with you. You want the respect that never came while you stayed disappear. Let her feel the chill that only happens when a man who once gave warmth decides she's no longer worthy of the fire. Let me be clear. This isn't about ghosting. It's not manipulation. It's the final language of a man who will not be disrespected twice. You already spoke. You already warned. You already gave more chances than they ever gave back. Now you calibrate your presence like a weapon. You don't disappear because you're hurt. You disappear because you refuse to be handled like an option. And this is what they never tell you. The absence of your reaction is not passive. It's a message that says you no longer have access to me. Not because I hate you, but because you lost the privilege to witness me. They told you to talk it out, to give it time, to be the mature one. But maturity isn't staying in rooms where you're silently bleeding. Maturity is knowing when the battle is no longer worthy of your sword. Let me ask you something dangerous, something sacred. When was the last time your silence spoke louder than your defense? Because in a Machiavellian world, the strongest position is stillness under fire. When she yells, mocks, tests, you don't flinch, you don't engage. You step back just enough to let her feel gravity without you. You give her one chance to correct, and if she doubles down, you disappear. Not in cruelty, in certainty. And watch. Suddenly your absence creates more conversations than your presence ever did. They start to wonder, where did he go? Why is he so quiet? What did I do wrong? That's the echo of respect being reborn in the emptiness you left behind. So, from this moment forward, don't explain your boundaries. Enforce them with distance. Don't announce your worth. Let them discover it in your absence. Don't beg to be understood. Be missed. And when they come back, if they come back, don't reopen the door with emotion. Open it with calculation, with new terms, with the knowledge that presence from now on is earned. Because Machiavelli understood something most men never will. Power is not in how loud you fight. It's in how silently you vanish and never return the same. Welcome to your new strategy. You don't walk away to surrender. You walk away to reset the entire board. They accused you of being cold, arrogant, selfish, too quiet. And you wanted to explain, didn't you? You wanted to defend your name, your heart, your intent. But let me ask you something. Most men never dare to ask themselves, what if defending yourself is the trap? They told you that silence means guilt, that clearing your name is strength. But Machiavelli, he knew better. He understood the paradox you're drowning in now. The moment you defend, you kneel. And the moment you kneel, they rewrite who you are, not based on truth, but on how desperate you were to be understood. You think you're clarifying, but you're just confirming one thing, that their lie got to you. Because the man who's grounded in truth doesn't scramble to be seen. He lets time, outcomes, and behavior do the talking. And when they lie about him, distort his image, question his loyalty, he says nothing, because he knows truth doesn't flinch. Let me ask you again, brother. Why do you explain? Because you want to keep the peace. Because you want them to know your heart. They already knew it. That's why they twisted it. This was never about clarity. It was always about control. They paint you as the villain because they needed someone to blame. Not because you were wrong, but because you stopped making their comfort your duty. And now when the narrative turns against you, your instinct is to plead your case. But here's the dangerous truth. A lion never argues with a hyena. He just keeps walking, because silence isn't surrender. Silence is a filter. It separates those who need gossip to believe from those who trust their own perception of who you are. They called you distant fine. Let them experience what real distance feels like. Let them fill in the blanks with their own guilt. You don't defend because your reality is defense enough. They'll watch you speak with integrity in rooms they can't enter. They'll hear your name mentioned in spaces they've been excluded from. They'll see you growing calm, collected, powerful. While they obsess, spiral, and explain, and suddenly the narrative begins to crack. Because people aren't blind, they start asking, if he's really what they say, why does he move the way he does? If he's so arrogant, why does he speak with such clarity? If he's so cold, why do others still seek his counsel? That's when the truth doesn't just come out. It floods, but it only floods if you stay silent long enough for it to matter. If you jump in too soon, if you defend, argue, prove, you kill the mystique. You collapse the advantage. Because in this modern world, the man who says less commands more. The man who doesn't explain every move, doesn't justify every shift, doesn't chase after public redemption, becomes the one they cannot predict. And unpredictability. That's the new fear. That's the new power. So the next time someone misrepresents you, let them. Smile. Tilt your head. Say nothing. Let them scream into the void while your name grows quieter, stronger, wrapped in the mystery of a man who never needed to explain his greatness. Because here's the Machiavellian truth they never taught you. Defending your name weakens it. Living your truth immortalizes it. The ones who matter will watch. They'll notice the gap between what was said and what is, and they'll make their own judgment, a more honest one, a more lasting one. Because you didn't beg for it. You earned it. You let reality do the talking. And it roared. They didn't attack you openly, did they? No loud betrayal, no public scene, just subtle erosion. A pause too long, a compliment that felt like a cut, a rumor passed like smoke behind your back. Let me ask you, how do you defend yourself against an enemy who smiles when they shake your hand? How do you confront someone who never says your name, but somehow your reputation bends every time they enter the room? You think keeping the peace will protect you. You think being the bigger man means letting it go. You tell yourself it's not worth the drama. But that's exactly what they count on. Because silence is where saboteurs thrive. They don't need to destroy you directly. They just need your withdrawal. They just need your invisibility. And once you stop showing up fully, once you pull your energy back, they begin rewriting the story without you in it. They frame you as difficult, as unstable, as cold, and here's the part that burns the most. People start believing it, not because they have proof, but because you went quiet. And in a world ruled by perception, the man who doesn't speak becomes the man no one defends. You think your truth will protect you, but Machiavelli would whisper something darker. Truth unspoken is powerless in the hands of liars. Visibility is your sword. Precision is your armor. You want to stop the whisper campaign. You don't confront it with gossip. You crush it with presence. You walk back into the rooms they tried to exile you from. Not with bitterness, but with brilliance. You speak clearly. You move decisively. You outperform every expectation. You become undeniable. Because here's what they fear most: you being seen, you being visible, not loud, not reactive, just present and unshakable, because the man who refuses to disappear unmasks the people who hoped he would. You think staying out of the way keeps you safe. But Machiavelli knew better. He knew that survival is never passive. To remain in power, one must be both feared and visible. And so, you rise not to retaliate, but to illuminate. Let your results speak louder than their rumors. Let your competence choke their speculation. Let your name be echoed in rooms they can't access, not because you defended yourself, but because you made defense unnecessary. Let me ask you, man to man, what if your silence is not maturity, but manipulation? You haven't seen yet. What if your avoidance of conflict has handed your enemies the very space they needed to become trusted? You want to destroy a silent saboteur, make them visible. You don't expose them with words, you expose them by shining brighter. You show up with excellence. You move in circles they can't fake their way through. You rise with so much clarity that their whispers turn into obvious insecurity. Because nothing reveals a hidden agenda like someone who keeps winning without saying a single bitter word. They'll start to sweat in rooms where your name is mentioned. They'll laugh nervously when others praise your work, because they know you didn't have to discredit them. You simply outlasted them. Let that be your revenge. Not insults, not proof, presence. You want to reclaim your name, reclaim your space. Stand in your value. Stop dimming your light to avoid drama, and start letting it expose the ones who were never meant to stand beside you. Because in this game of perception, the most feared man is not the loudest. He's the one who rose quietly while his enemies whispered, until his results roared louder than any lie ever could. Let me ask you something. What happens when they try to become you? When they copy your tone, mimic your posture, mirror your moves, borrow your presence? You think it's flattering. You think imitation is a form of respect, but it's not. It's theft. And in the Machiavellian world, theft is a declaration of war. They don't want to be like you. They want to replace you, to dilute your essence until the room forgets who built the original, until your voice is just one echo among many. You think being authentic is enough, but authenticity alone doesn't protect your position. You must evolve, ruthlessly, relentlessly, quietly. Because the moment they understand your formula, you change the equation. Let me say this as clearly as possible. You are not here to be replicated. You are here to be uncatchable. You want to destroy imitators, don't confront them. Transcend them. They'll copy your last version while you build the next one. They'll mimic your words while you change your language. They'll match your vibe while you shift into a new frequency. You don't fight them, you leave them behind. Because reinvention isn't a luxury for men like us. It's survival. You think the man who evolves too fast gets misunderstood? Yes, but the man who evolves too slow gets forgotten. They're chasing your shadow, but you're already gone. Let me ask again. How many times have you watched someone copy your blueprint while you stood still, thinking your past version was enough? You thought I've arrived, but arrival is a trap, because stillness invites imitation. Machiavelli would have seen it coming. He understood that power doesn't stay in the hands of those who earned it. It flows to the ones who keep becoming. Because the imitator isn't interested in self-mastery. He's watching you like a student watches a magician. He doesn't want the art, he wants your illusion. So what do? You burn the illusion. You destroy the persona. You built the moment it becomes familiar. You kill your past identity the second it becomes predictable. You trade comfort for chaos. You let the old version of you die, so a stronger one can emerge. They want your power. Make sure they don't know where you keep it. Change your pattern. Shift your schedule. Alter your tone. When they show up expecting yesterday's version, give them tomorrow's prototype. Because here's what they'll never admit. The man who reinvents himself faster than they can mimic him becomes a ghost they can't chase. You don't tell them you've changed. You show them by letting their imitation fall flat. They'll speak like you, move like you, but it won't land. Why? Because it lacks soul. Because it wasn't born from pressure, pain, and precision. It was stolen, not built, and stolen fire doesn't burn. Let them copy your last act. You're already rewriting the script. Let them study your moves. You're already playing a new game. Let them catch your scent. You've already changed your skin. Because the moment they think they know you, you become unknowable. That is your power. Not domination through force, but confusion through evolution. You want to become untouchable. Don't guard your secrets. Become someone new so quickly, they never know which version they're competing with. They'll call you inconsistent. They'll call you hard to understand. They'll call you unpredictable. Good. Predictability is control for them. And the man who is unreadable is unbreakable. So stop defending your last identity. Stop performing for people who memorized your old moves. Stop existing in the skin they're most comfortable around. They don't deserve consistency. They deserve confusion. And every time you evolve, you remind them, you were never the blueprint. You are the architect. And architects don't explain. They build. Let me ask you something. What do you do when someone underestimates you? When they smirk because they think you're too quiet, too soft, too slow to retaliate. They think they're above you because you didn't strike first, because you didn't need the room's attention. But here's the truth. They never see coming. The man who doesn't need validation is the man building position. You think dominance is loud, but Machiavelli would have told you real power doesn't bark. It builds. They think you're passive. They mistake your observation for weakness. They laugh, they talk, they boast, and you say nothing. But that silence, that stillness, that pause. It's not surrender. It's strategy. You're not behind. You're beneath their radar until the moment you choose to rise. They underestimate you because your ego doesn't need to be fed. But what they don't realize is that every time they look down on you, they're standing on a floor. You laid. Let me tell you what Machiavelli knew centuries ago. Arrogance rots from within when left unchecked. But the quiet man, the one they mock, the one they forget, he builds legacy while they chase applause. They build identity through noise. You build yours through architecture. They show up with emotion. You show up with elevation. You don't need to insult them. You don't need to correct them. You just need to outperform them so brutally that their confidence chokes on its own delusion. Because here's the thing, arrogance collapses when the environment shifts, when the stakes get higher, when the lights come on, and suddenly, the man they dismissed is standing above them with calm in his eyes and steel in his spine. They thought they had time. They thought they had the edge. But they didn't realize. You were never competing. You were calculating. Let me ask you again. How many people in your life assumed you were less than you are simply because you didn't posture, because you didn't speak to be heard, because you didn't react when tested? They thought that meant they had the upper hand, but Machiavelli would have smiled at that, because he understood the highest humiliation is not losing to someone you feared, it's losing to someone you once mocked, the man you ignored, the man you laughed at, the man you didn't think you had to watch, and now that man holds the seat you wanted. Now that man speaks and the room listens. Now that man moves and the ground shifts, and you're left wondering, how did I miss it? I'll tell you how. You confused quiet with weak. You confused delay with fear. You confused restraint with absence. But the man who withholds isn't behind, he's positioning. And when the time is right, he'll move, not with permission, not with apology, but with precision. You want to break the arrogant, don't argue, don't confront. Just elevate, win in silence, dominate in performance. Become so excellent, so undeniable that even your enemies start citing you. That's how position crushes arrogance. Because the higher you climb, the smaller they feel. And it's not because you attacked them. It's because you reminded them they never stood a chance. So no, you don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to correct their assumptions. You don't need to prove anything. You just need to become so powerful in silence that their pride becomes their downfall. Let them underestimate you. Let them sleep on you. Let them laugh. Because when they finally wake up, you won't be on their level anymore. You'll be the one they can't reach, the one they once dismissed and now can't forget. That's Machiavellian. That's how you end arrogance, not with fire, but with altitude. Let me ask you something. What do you think hurts more, being insulted or being erased? You think the worst thing someone can do is attack your name? No. The worst thing they can do is stop saying it. They used to talk about you. They used to mock you, test. You try to rattle your presence. But one day, the air goes quiet. Not because they respect you, but because you've removed their access to your world. They don't hear from you. They don't get updates. They're no longer part of the audience. And they start to wonder, did I matter at all? Did he even notice I was gone? That's psychological erasure. And it is far more devastating than revenge, because here's what no one told you growing up. The most haunting punishment is not rage. It's removal. They insulted you. They played with your name. They thought they could get a rise out of you. But you didn't fight back. You didn't explain. You didn't correct the record. You simply vanished quietly, surgically. And in doing so, you rewrote the story. You stopped reacting. You stopped giving them meaning. And now they're not your enemy. They're a ghost, still watching, still waiting, but no longer relevant. They thought being cut off meant drama, but you gave them something worse, irrelevance. Let me tell you what Machiavelli knew long before social media, before therapy, talk, before healing became an aesthetic. The final humiliation isn't defeat. It's being forgotten by someone you thought you still mattered to. You think the pain is in losing someone. No, the pain is realizing you were never needed, that your absence created more peace than your presence ever did. And when you reach that level of discipline where your silence becomes the judgment, where your lack of presence becomes a lesson, you've mastered psychological warfare. They'll wonder what you're doing. They'll scroll. They'll listen for your name in conversations, but you're no longer in the loop they assumed you'd orbit. You didn't exile them. With anger, you let them evaporate. Let me ask you this. How many people in your past would be shaken if they knew you never think about them anymore? That their betrayal didn't scar you, it clarified you. That their disrespect didn't damage you, it freed you. They thought they wounded you, but all they really did was give you the clarity to remove them. And that is something no apology can fix. You think punishment is loud, you think it's confrontation, but the real punishment, it's becoming a non-factor. It's hearing I haven't thought about them in years. It's seeing you thrive in rooms where their name never even comes up. It's watching you rise in spaces where their presence never belonged. It's realizing they've been edited out of your legacy. That's the scar they carry. Not because you destroyed them, but because you no longer needed to acknowledge they existed. They used to know your voice. Now they're left guessing your thoughts. They used to know your patterns. Now you're unreadable. They used to share space with you. Now you've built a life where their name doesn't echo in a single hallway. That's power. Because Machiavelli would have told you, a man is not feared for his anger. He's feared for his indifference. You didn't just stop talking to them. You made them invisible. Not to punish. Not to hurt, but because you had more important places to be. So when someone asks you, hey, whatever happened to that guy? You just tilt your head and say, honestly, I haven't thought about them in a long time. And you say it with zero bitterness, zero heat, just absence. Because what you've done without ever needing a fight is something Machiavelli would call the final move. You've erased them without rage. You've silenced them with success. And now they live with a truth you never had to say out loud. They lost you the moment they underestimated you. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you looked at someone who hurt you and simply never looked again? They told you to forgive. They told you to rise above. They told you the strong man doesn't hold grudges, he moves on. But what they never told you is this. There's a difference between forgiveness and forgetting someone ever mattered. See, Machiavelli didn't teach retaliation. He taught removal, not in rage, not in scandal, but in silence so absolute it rewrites the entire story. They think the opposite of love is hate, but it's not. The opposite of love is indifference. You want to know what makes a man unforgettable, not his anger, not his applause. It's the chill of his absence. You used to reply. You used to explain. You used to justify the way they made you feel. Now you say nothing, not because you're defeated, but because you've transcended the conversation. They insulted you. They underestimated you. They played games with your name. But now, you don't just stop talking to them. You make it look like they never existed in your kingdom to begin with. And let me tell you something they'll never admit. That kind of disappearance haunts people, not because they miss you, but because they finally realize they were a chapter and you were the whole book. They go to speak about you, but your silence makes them wonder if their memory even deserves to speak your name. You didn't destroy them. You deleted the option of access. That's what psychological erasure is. And it is far more brutal than any confrontation. They expected drama. You gave them a void. They tried to provoke you into emotion. You responded with emotional extinction. And here's what no one teaches young men. You don't always win by fighting. You win by becoming someone who can't be provoked. Let me say that again. You win when they realize your silence is permanent, that your absence is your final verdict, and you're not angry. You're indifferent. That's the kill shot, because they thought this was about revenge. But you weren't trying to punish them. You were recentering your peace. They text, they stalk, they hover around your edges waiting for re-entry. But there is no door anymore, just a fortress where their name is no longer recognized. And the world around them begins to notice. Why is he so quiet? Why does he never mention them? Why has he moved so far ahead without even a shadow of bitterness? Because that's what real power looks like. It doesn't announce it withdraws. It doesn't perform it exits. And when it exits, it takes the oxygen with it. That's why they suffocate. Not because you yelled, but because you left them talking to a ghost of their own relevance. You want the most Machiavellian move. Here it is. You don't slam the door. You let them knock until they realize it was never open. They used to feel powerful, making you react. Now they look weak, just bringing up your name. Because no one's listening. Because no one cares. Not even you. That's not cruelty. That's emotional evolution. Because men who are building legacies don't keep a seat at the table for people who can't even bring peace. Let me end with this. You don't need revenge. You don't need an explanation. You need standards. And when those standards are violated, you don't flinch, you vanish. And when they ask others, what happened to him? Let them hear the most Machiavellian line of all. He's moved on, and he never looked back. Let me ask you something. What if I told you the real victory never comes from confrontation, but from transcendence? They told you to stand your ground, to fight back, to show them who you are. But what if the most dangerous man in the room isn't the one who fights, but the one who no longer needs to? You think strength is in resistance. But Machiavelli would tell you the real power is in becoming untouchable, not through dominance, through distance. They insult you. They exclude you. They bait you into defending yourself. And at first you want to respond. Your hands itch. Your chest tightens. You think if I say the right thing, I'll regain control. But that's a trap. Because the moment you explain, you've already lost the frame. Let me repeat that for the men in the back. Explaining yourself to someone beneath your purpose is how you get pulled into wars that were never yours to fight. You don't win by responding. You don't win by correcting their opinion. You win when their opinion no longer has access to your nervous system. You think people stop attacking because you made them understand. But the truth is, they stop when they realize you're no longer reachable. That's transcendence. It's not weakness, it's strategy. The kind of strategy Machiavelli lived by. Because the man who doesn't react, the man who keeps building, keeps moving, keeps rising, is not only feared, he becomes untouchable. So let me ask again, who are you fighting? And why you think the loudest voice wins? No. The most composed presence ends the conversation before it even starts. They call you cold good. They say you've changed even better. Because the man you were the one who fought to be heard, he was replaceable. But the man you are now, the one who walks away without noise, that man becomes legend. They don't write books about men who argued. They write books about men who disappeared and left echoes behind. Let me say it clearer. The ultimate power isn't retaliation. It's removal. You don't win the chess game by attacking every piece. You win by positioning yourself so masterfully that every opponent move is already a loss. That's transcendence. Not louder, higher, not harder, further, not angrier, calmer. You're no longer in the same arena. You're building a world where they can't even get a ticket to the game. That's what breaks them. Not what you said, but what you refused to say. Not what you destroyed, but how you rose quiet, composed, undeniable. Because here's what they'll never admit. The moment you stopped needing to be right, you became impossible to defeat. You didn't argue. You didn't threaten. You transcended. And now they talk about you in rooms you no longer enter. They replay your silence. They analyze your absence. And the more they talk, the less they matter. That's your revenge. Not violence. Legacy. You became someone who doesn't need to raise his voice because his very presence rewrites the rules. And the ones who tried to bring you down, they're still standing in the same place, talking about the version of you that no longer exists. So here's your final truth. You don't have to fight to win. You just have to elevate so high, they can't even reach the battlefield. And once you do that, you'll never have to look back. In a world that constantly rewards loudness, the real power belongs to those who move in silence. You don't need to fight to be respected. You need to become the kind of man whose presence shifts the tone of a room without saying a word. The kind of man who doesn't chase validation, but builds a life so disciplined, so measured, that his absence is felt more deeply than most people's noise. The lesson is simple but brutal. Stop explaining yourself to people who aren't qualified to hear you. Stop giving your energy to those who've never earned it. Stop loving without structure. Start protecting your peace like it's your legacy. Because the moment you let someone cross your boundary without consequence, you teach them how to treat you. But when you enforce your standards without rage, without drama, with cold clarity, you shift the power dynamic forever. Respect isn't taken. It's engineered through stillness, through strategy, through becoming the kind of man they talk about when you're not in the room. Let them underestimate you. Let them laugh. And then let your rise rewrite the story.